Good afternoon, welcome to another A-Push video with Mr. Paid. Today we're looking at the general topic of ideological change in the 18th century. This is a time period of huge change between being kind of a monarchical system, of which the American colonies derive from, and switching to Republican-style governments where power all comes from the people. Our essential question for today is what new ideas during the 18th century led to discussion and change in religion, society, and governmental structures. And I'm also going to throw in economics as well. Alright, so in the 18th century in Europe, for most of the century you had monarchies that controlled religion, economy, religion, and they limited the rights of people. You could look at something like Great Britain where they had Magna Carta and an English Bill of Rights, but it's pretty limited, and most places had less than that. So let's go ahead and look at where we're at in the North American colonies in the early 1700s. So first we have this kind of solitary neglect period that we've already talked about, leading up till 1763, the end of the French and Indian War. You have the First Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening is going to be a time where you had a dominant Anglican church in the South, and you had taxes collected to support the national supported sponsored church, the Anglican church. And so you had kind of a religious favoritism. But the First Great Awakening is going to kind of be the old lights versus the new lights. You have new denominations, more people breaking away from the Anglican church, less ties to the king, and a religion where the king was in charge and would basically direct things. This is more people choosing their faith that they desired. Now, the middle and northern colonies already had this in place, right? We had the Puritans, we had smaller amounts of Quakers and Catholics, and all kinds of groups that were not welcome in England under the Anglican control by the king. But you're going to have now new denominations pop up, and it further erodes the Anglican Church. The Enlightenment. Okay, you've got some key figures with the Enlightenment that in the early to mid 1700s, they have injected these new ideas that are going to be the basis of all of these Republican revolutions. First, of course, the United States. John Locke is going to advocate in detail the individual natural rights people should have. He is going to basically talk about a lot of the ideas that come to be in the Declaration of Independence, but chief among them is kind of this idea of a social contract, but specifically the rights of people, and there should be a Bill of Rights, and everyone has natural rights. Thomas Hobbes said you need to have a strong government, but that individuals needed to have protected rights. And he said, if you don't have a good government, everything will fall apart, but you can't trample on the rights of the individual. Montesquieu is going to argue for division of powers, kind of a separation of powers in government, and three branches that would all keep a government from becoming tyrannical. And Rousseau is also going to touch on the individual rights of man. He writes a book called The Social Contract, really showing how governments get their power, its consent of the popular will, and you can get rid of them if they're bad government. Adam Smith, in the economic realm down below, Adam Smith is going to basically say that a government-directed economy is not the best, that individuals should be allowed to have economic freedom to make their own decisions. Let's see how these change agents manifest themselves as we look at the next area. So we had early 1700s, and now we're going to, with the solitary neglect period, now we're going to post-French and Indian War, kind of the imperial crackdown, the road to revolution in the United States, so to speak. We have letters from a Pennsylvania farmer. This is a rejection by John Dickinson, one of the more important but maybe not as famous today founding fathers. He basically talks about how there is a lack of justice in the British taxation policies they imposed to try and pay off their debts. He talks about how the Parliament and the Crown need to allow representation, that they need to not just impose unilaterally revenue taxes, and the colonists should unite against this if that does occur. Common sense talks about how ridiculous it is for an island to rule a continent, and says the American people are ready to be their own country, and there's no point in having this king and basically breaks down in a variety of ways, just rejects the idea of monarchy. Declaration of Independence, of course, is going to incorporate many things that come out of the Enlightenment. All men have certain unalienable rights. That's hearkening back to the natural rights. It's going to talk about the social contract. When a government does not do things they should do, the government should be removed and replaced. And he goes on to basically, Jefferson is going to detail all of the abuses they've suffered as justification for breaking that social contract with the king. So you're going to see some different ways that basically there's justification for getting rid of the existing monarchy structure that they have. The Stamp Act Congress in the mid-1700s, really you've got Adam Smith and, essentially at this time, Adam Smith, he had kind of talked about economic freedom, and again, the Stamp Act Congress is going to be rejecting taxation without representation. Okay, so all of this takes us to kind of this post-American Revolution period, and a variety of things are happening. So our first category was religion and society. We talked about the First Great Awakening, kind of a democratization of evangelical Protestantism going on there. You are seeing people having more choices, people going where they want, less direct state and monarchy control of religion, especially in the South where it had been the greatest. So you have state governments that are going to form their own bills of rights, and freedom of religion will be something that's included in those. Republican motherhood, dealing in terms of with women, in terms of society, you're going to see that this idea of having a republic, that power comes from the people. That idea that women are going to be given this special role, as society saw it at the time, that they will train up good young Republicans. Not the Republicans of today. We're not talking about politics, but we're talking about citizens. Citizens that would believe in the importance of having a republic where power was derived from the people. Okay? And that the people, as Rousseau said, the people who were the magistrates or the different government leaders and bureaucrats and politicians, the representatives, they would be basically acting in the best interest of the people, for the people. Okay. Other things in terms of politics that arrived at state governments. The state governments, each colony is asked to form a state government, a state constitution once the Declaration of Independence has happened in the Second Continental Congress. Many of the states come up with a Bill of Rights. Virginia's Bill of Rights is the most famous and knowledgeable. It had the freedom of religion. States they experiment and come up with different new ideas. The separation of powers is an important idea. They come from Montesquieu. These things, none of them are new creations. They come out of these Enlightenment philosophers. Having a strong legislative branch, that would be the dominant branch, which means it's more indirect power of the people and less power concentrated in one person's hands. Also, legislative control of money, which is something that Parliament had, and some of the different legislative bodies already had. They maintained that. Weak executives, very different from any country on earth. They would have a chief executive who was basically more of a figurehead. Under the Articles of Confederation, it's basically going to be kind of a lead official of the legislature. So it's not an independent person taking all this power. The Articles of Confederation, more power given to the states, kind of a decentralized government, not much control from the central government, from the federal government, but a lot of, it's a confederal structure. The states are actually not able to be told what to do by the federal government. In terms of economic items, we have, again, more economic freedom being arrived at all the time, and you see this is kind of a legacy that we'll come back to. I didn't write it up here, but what you will see shortly after the Constitution is, there's a protection of, in the Constitution itself, of copyrights and patents, and a respect for contracts, that they cannot be broken by the government. So a lot of things empowering people to form businesses will emerge through legal support of economics. In terms of later impacts for political areas, France has the French Revolution, which rocks Europe and the world, and kind of Americans and people now around the rest of the world are kind of redefining what it means to be a citizen, what should a government be, and France is another experiment in this area. After France, you have Haiti, which in 1803 finishes off a over decade-long kind of revolutionary battle against the French, and that of course leads to Napoleon selling all of the Louisiana territory to the United States and Louisiana Purchase. So the Haitian Revolution was very important for our purposes, but it is influenced by the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Also Brazil, which is a Portuguese colony, by 1822 they have a revolution. And you will see through the mid-1800s, more and more Latin American countries have revolutions, throw off the yoke of these old world empires, Monroe Doctrines partially addressing that. And you're going to see kind of political revolutions being a later, long-lasting impact of the American Revolution politically. In terms of societal things, unfortunately, the slavery issue, they decided to get the Constitution ratified. It was going to be impossible to deal with slavery, which is, again, very unfortunate, but they are going to avoid the slavery issue. They avoid it by having a 20-year extension of the slave trade, and then it'll be phased out by having a 3/5 compromise, and otherwise basically being silent on slavery, which allows this problem to fester and eventually be a huge cause, obviously, of the Civil War. Abigail Adams, she writes to her husband when they're working on the Constitution and says, "Remember the ladies." Basically, she's saying, hey, don't leave us out. Women should not be second-class citizens. But the Founding Fathers are unwilling to go that far. Some things the Founding Fathers do, they are recognizing as a society, not by law, through Republican motherhood, the importance of women, giving them more of a dignified and better place in society in the way they're viewed. But at the same time, in terms of granting them equal citizenship, in terms of granting them the right to vote, they're not going to receive that. So they're kind of stuck in the middle. As you will see on one of the next videos when we talk about the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, you'll see that the Founding Fathers, when they're creating the Constitution, there are definite Enlightenment ideas they want to support and follow. A lot of this stuff in here, but there's a limit on how far they'll go for Native Americans. Definitely not very far at all for African Americans. For women, it's only, and really even in terms of voting rights and having things like an electoral college, they kind of only go part of the way toward like a full embracing of what we would consider democracy today. Well, so again, what new ideas emerged during the 18th century and led to these discussions and changes? A lot of things coming out of the First Great Awakening and the Enlightenment, a little bit out of Adam Smith as well, and it kind of manifests itself throughout the rest of the 1800s in dramatic societal and political change. That's all the time we have for today. Stay classy.